إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah, and as such we should praise Him, seek His help and His forgiveness, and seek refuge in Him from the evil which is within ourselves and the evil which results from our deeds. For whomsoever Allah has guided, none can misguide, and whomsoever Allah has allowed to go astray, none can guide. And I bear witness that there is no God worthy of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the last messenger of Allah. The topic for this evening focuses on spirit possession. Before beginning, let me clarify that I'm not the world's most prolific writer on Islamic topics. This is a bit of an exaggeration. Spirit possession is a topic which I have written on as a topic for my thesis, exorcist tradition in Islam. But at the same time, this does not make me an expert in dealing with illnesses that people may be faced with. Because I just want to say this right at the very beginning, because research into this topic and an understanding of the ins and outs of it doesn't necessarily turn one into now the exorcist, where people will come flooding for treatment, etc., etc. So please, those of you who have your illnesses, don't assume that I'm going to be able to help you. Allah is the one who helps those who seek His help. And as I will explain in the course of my lecture, the methodology of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the methodology that we will have to follow in order to treat our illnesses: spiritual, physical, intellectual, etc. Now, as I said, the topic is one addressing the issue of spirit possession. And by spirits, we're speaking about the jinn, because from an Islamic perspective, we do not believe that human spirits can affect human beings. This is a Christian tradition, Hindu tradition, other systems, because of their ignorance of the world of the jinn, have attributed things which are taking place from the world of the jinn to actions of human spirits after people have died. Traditionally, Christian as well as Hindu, Buddhist beliefs focus on the person who dies in times of tragedy, some tragic circumstances, murder, these type of things, where the person who dies in this way, they believe that the spirit continues to wander around the earth and it may affect people, and this is the basis of what they perceive to be spirit possession. But from an Islamic perspective, when a human being dies, they leave this world. The spirit enters into the world of the barzakh, and that spirit has no effect on the living. There is no contact between human beings and the spirit of the dead. So from an Islamic perspective, the only possible source for a spirit possession, people to be affected by spiritual forces, is from the agency of the jinn. There have been people historically among Muslims who have denied that this takes place. Most of those who have denied it are from a group of rationalist philosophers which are referred to as the Mu'tazilites. But for the vast majority of Muslim scholarship, the issue of possession has been a recognized fact. And the evidence which is used, of course, from the Islamic perspective starts with the Quran and the verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 275, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا لَا يَقُومُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَقُومُ الَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَأْسِ. Those who devour interest rise up like one stumbling from Satan's touch. And the leading scholars of tafsir like Al-Qurtubi, Ibn Jarir, Ibn Kathir, all of them have pointed out that this verse is evidence for the correctness of those who hold that human beings may be possessed by shaitan and the world of the jinn, devils, we could say in general. We have from the Sunnah the statement quoted by Safiya, one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said that Satan indeed flows in the bloodstream of Adam's descendants. This is one of the most commonly quoted texts. But there are also a number of narrations, among them that which was narrated by Ya'la ibn Murrah, in which he said, I saw Allah's Messenger do three things which no one before or after me saw. I went with him on a trip. On the way we passed by a woman sitting at the roadside with a young boy. She called out, O Messenger of Allah, this boy is afflicted with a trial, and from him we have also been afflicted with a trial. I do not know how many times per day he is seized with fits. The Prophet ﷺ said to her, give him to me. She lifted him up to the Prophet ﷺ, and he placed the boy between himself and the middle of the saddle, opened the boy's mouth and blew in it 3 times, saying, in the name of Allah, Bismillah, I am the slave of Allah. Get out, enemy of Allah. Then he gave the boy back to her and said, meet us on our return to this place and inform us how he has fared. We then went. On our return, we found her in the same place with 3 sheep. And he said to her, as Prophet ﷺ said to her, how has your son fared? She replied, by the one who sent you with the truth. We have not detected anything unusual in his behavior up to this time. So this is among the hadiths which are used to indicate the realities of possession, because if no possession actually took place, then it would imply that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was involved in some act of folly and deception. What was the point of opening this boy's mouth? Who was he communicating to when he said, get out, enemy of Allah? So this is among the clear evidences which we utilize, those who hold the position that the jinn may possess human beings. Now, when we look at the reasons as to why does the world of the jinn interfere with the world of human beings? Why would it lead to possession of human beings? First and foremost, we have to understand that what we may perceive as being possession, where a person may fall in a state of fits, a person may seem to have changed their personality, a variety of different things, which have been identified as the signs of possession, that these do not always indicate actual possession. In fact, from my own research, which was quite extensive, in the terms of field research, I gathered material from the Sudan, from Egypt, from Arabia, Bahrain, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan. I traveled in a number of parts of the Muslim world, gathering information from those Muslim scholars, etc., who were involved in exorcism and claimed to exorcise according to the Quran and Sunnah. Of course, there are those involved in all kinds of other things. I didn't bother because that field would have become extremely vast, and I already recognize that the only acceptable methodology would be by way of utilizing the Quran and the Sunnah as the basis. At any rate, a sampling of all of the various scholars or exorcists that I came across in the Muslim world and discussing their own experiences clearly indicated to me that the vast majority of cases that came before them were not actual cases of exorcism. And actually, even in comparing the data which came from Christian sources, because the Christians have been actively involved in exorcism from the time of Christ, and especially amongst the Catholics, I mean, they have a very strong tradition of exorcism. And what we can find uniformly in both Muslim as well as Christian exorcists is that the vast majority of cases are psychological or biological. That is only a small percentage, someplace around 10 to 15% of the cases that are brought before people are involved in this, where we're actually dealing with cases of possession. And to indicate the biological sources, scholars have quoted a particular hadith which is found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, wherein one of the companions, Ata ibn Abi Rabah, had pointed out a woman who in the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had come to him and asked him to pray for her. And when the Prophet ﷺ inquired as to what the reason was, she explained that she would be overcome from time to time with fits, and it would cause her clothing to fall from her and expose herself. So she asked the Prophet ﷺ to pray for her and have it removed from her. So he said, if you wish, be patient and you will have paradise. And if you wish, I can pray to Allah to cure you. She said, I will be patient. Then she added, but I become uncovered, so pray to Allah that I not get uncovered. So he prayed for her. So in this hadith, this particular narration, scholars like Ibn al-Qayyim and others have pointed out that this addressed a biological cause. If this had been a case of possession, then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would have used the common method that he used in dealing with other cases of possession, where he would instruct the possessing spirit to leave the individual. And this methodology also, we could say, is found in the Gospels in description of Jesus, though we don't accept the Gospels as being truth, but there are some narrations in there which seem to coincide with it's information that we have, accurate information we have from Islamic sources, and that people who were possessed were brought to Jesus according to the text of the Gospels, and he instructed the possessing demons or spirits to leave, similar to the way in which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would instruct them. Now, if we leave that biological or psychological side and we go over to the actual cases of possession, Ibn al-Qayyim had said, in describing the reasons, evil spirits mostly gain control over those having little religious inclination and those whose hearts and tongues faith has deserted, those whose souls are desolate of the remembrance of Allah and of the formulas for strengthening the faith. When evil spirits meet a man who is isolated, weaponless and naked, they are easily able to attack him and overcome him. This is a general description of the state of people who tend to be overcome by the spirit world. Ibn Taymiyyah identified three main sources or causes among the jinn. He said the occasional possession of man by the jinn may be due to sensual desires on the part of the jinn, or even love, just as it may be among humans. A second reason was that demonic possession sometimes occur as a result of horseplay or jest or plain evil on the part of the jinn, just as evil and mischief occurs among humans for similar reasons. And thirdly, possession is most often a result of a jinn being angry with some wrong which has been done to them, that in some way human beings have accidentally harmed them, and as a response to that harm they may attack humans. And Ibn Taymiyyah pointed out that it's due to the ignorant and volatile nature of the jinn that their vengeful punishment of human beings go far beyond their just deserve. Now, when we deal with possession may be complete possession, or it may be partial possession. In the case of partial possession, we have in the Muslim world as well as in the non-Muslim world a practice which is called mediumship. That is, cases where individuals become mediums by which one may communicate with the world of the spirits. The individual, male or female, who then identifies himself or herself as a medium will seem to be overcome and may speak in the voice of one's grandfather or one's mother dead, etc. And this, in general, people in ignorance accept as being the dead actually communicating with them. This is a common phenomena in many parts of the world, even amongst Muslims. However, the realities in such cases is not that the spirit world, meaning human spirits, are in communication with the living world, but this is a case where a jinn may possess this person and communicate through them, and that jinn may be the qareen of the human who died. That is, as Prophet ﷺ informed us, each and every human being, when he is born, is assigned an angel that prompts him to good, and is also assigned an evil jinn that prompts him to evil. This is a struggle which each individual goes through throughout his life. There are promptings in the mind, in the conscious, and in the subconscious, coming from both the world of the angels as well as the world of the jinn. And when a human being dies, the jinn that is assigned to them, the qareen, does not die at the same time, because the life of the jinn is longer. So that qareen that was with the person who died remains in this world and may be the source of that mediumship, of that communication to human beings, where we imagine or we think that the voice and the information which is being conveyed to us is being conveyed to us by one of our dead relatives who have died. In fact, it is that same qareen, the qareen will be able to give us information of things which are unique to ourselves and that person. For example, yourself and your uncle, or yourself and your aunt or whatever, you experience certain things which nobody else knew about. And here is this medium communicating that information, and because this information is so private, it seems to you that this had to have been that dead relative of yours. The reality, as I said, is that it is from the qareen and not a human relative who has in fact died. Ibn Taymiyyah, talking about this phenomena, had said, the jinn usually communicate by either visions or voices with those seeking information among the idol worshippers, Christians, Jews, heretical Muslims driven astray by the devils. The devils will often respond while taking the form of the one besought while dead or alive. This frequently happens to Christians who call on those who they edify, whether dead or alive. It also occurs to heretical Muslims who call upon the dead or those not present, and the devils take the form of the one called upon. We also have possession which may be possession of objects. As we have partial possession of human beings, we also have possession of objects. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was narrated by Ibn Abbas to have said, when you go to sleep, put out your lamps, because Satan may guide something like this rat to a lamp and cause you to be burned. So the evil jinn may possess animals as well as objects, as in the case of a rat. In the case of objects, we have the case mentioned in the Quran with regards to the people of Moses alayhi salam, when he went to receive the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Samiri had them give their melted gold and melt it down and make a calf and have that calf and as an idol for them to worship. The people of Israel did not fall in worship to that calf simply because it was placed before them, but as Allah mentions in the Quran, that the calf mooed. The calf said moo. When the calf communicated, this is what convinced the people, the followers of Moses, the Israelites, that this calf was in fact alive. It was something which was somehow a god or whatever that they would worship. And of course for us, we understand that what has taken place here is that the jinn has entered into that body, the calf, the statue, and communicated in this way to fool people. And we've had, recent occurrences of this in 1997, all over the world. The Hindu god Ganesh, began to drink milk. People had been practicing their pujas, their acts of worship to this god, this elephant head god, Ganesh, in India and in wherever their temples are around the world for many, many years. And there was no special phenomena taking place. They would pour milk over it, etc. But on one particular day in the year 1997, they found that the milk was going into the mouth of the idol in India, as well as wherever the temples were. In London it happened, also in the Emirates where I was. They found they were pouring milk by the mouth of the idol, and that milk was going in. Now scientists tried to give explanation for it, that it was by capillary action and all kinds of other explanations, but the reality that these explanations really didn't hold water. The point is that at that particular instant, in different locations around the world, the jinn occupied these statues, started to imbibe this milk, giving the Hindus the impression that their god was alive, real. This was a miracle for them, convincing them of the authenticity of their belief. We can also have partial possessions happening, as in the case of Al-Hallaj. Al-Hallaj was a heretic, from a number of centuries ago, who has been elevated by some elements as being a saint. He was an individual who claimed that he was Allah, that there was no distinction between Allah and himself. And when he was taken before a tribunal and asked to recant his belief, he stood up and opened up his cloak and said, "There is nothing inside of this cloak except Allah." His favorite statement was, "Ana al-Haq." I am the embodiment of truth. And of course Allah describes himself, wa huwa al-Haq, that Allah is al-Haq. He says, "Ana al-Haq." He's saying Allah and I are one. So when he refused to recant this belief, he was taken and executed. His head was cut off. Now, according to the fables of those who have elevated him to this status of sainthood, they claim that when his head was cut off, as it fell and it rolled, it kept saying, "Ana al-Haq, Ana al-Haq, Ana al-Haq," right? And for them, this was confirmation that, in fact, yes, this individual, this deranged individual, was in fact a saint speaking the truth. But the realities, of course, is that if in fact this took place, we can understand that it would have taken place by way of the jinn speaking out through this individual's head, because surely that person being dead was not going to communicate with any of the living. The third way in which possession the jinn may affect our world is that of what we call demonic visions. That is, where the jinn may take forms which appear before people. This is common amongst Christians. You have many cases where they have seen the Christ child, Mary, appears before them, these type of things. We also have visions which are held by individuals, for example, who believe, again, this belief in sainthood and all this type of thing, where they have beliefs that certain individuals who they will designate as Sheikh so-and-so, as in the case of Sheikh Nazim and his followers, they claim that he can be in more than 7 places at the same time, and that his Sheikh was able to be in more than 14 different places at the same time. So what would happen is that he would be at home in Cyprus, and then some of his followers were saying, "But we saw him in Germany." He likes to go to Germany. Or they say, "We also saw him at the same time, the same day in Mecca performing Umrah." So this is evidence that this man is, somehow some kind of super spirit individual who's so close to Allah that he deserves, submission to. And so people submit themselves to him. in ways which are definitely against the teachings of Islam. However, this phenomena, has been identified by the scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah among them, to be well known. In the past, this same type of thing occurred. In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah even mentioned that some people had come to him and told him that whilst they were in the process of doing Hajj, one of them had hurt himself, and he called out on Ibn Taymiyyah for his help. He called out to him, "Oh Ibn Taymiyyah, help me," at the time. And he said when he called out, he saw Ibn Taymiyyah appear before him. And when he related this back to Ibn Taymiyyah informed him that this was not him. This was a jinni, appearing, confirming his shirk. Because for him to call out to Ibn Taymiyyah for help, Ibn Taymiyyah is, thousands of miles away. He is there in Mecca calling out to him for help. This is shirk. To call on anyone other than Allah is shirk. So those people who are involved in various acts of shirk, you will find among them visions common to confirm their states of disbelief. There's also a case which I came across in Sri Lanka back in 1992, in which a young boy, he was some 2.5 years old. He was born in a Muslim family. His name was Izzan, Muhammad Izzan. He was born in a Muslim family. And all of a sudden, he had this sort of illness. He was in hospital, briefly. He came out, he hadn't spoken. After this illness, he began to speak. And he began to speak in the language which was the language of the Hindus. He began to speak in the language, the Tamil language, right? Whereas his family were speaking Sinhalese, right? And he started to ask to go to a temple. And they took him to this temple. His family took him to the temple, and he started to do the rites of worship before the idols, and he started to sing the hymns of the Hindus, their chants and their worship, etc. It was something really, quite amazing. And this was documented by doctors, etc. They documented this. Was very real. It was in the newspapers, front page news, and it was quite shocking. In fact, it reached a stage where people were making pilgrimage from India, from southern India, Tamil Nadu, making pilgrimage there to Sri Lanka to come to this boy. They were bringing gifts, and they were asking him, their future. And even Muslims, unfortunately, got caught up in this. Many Muslims were coming to this individual and asking him to tell them their future and all this kind of things, And fortunately, one of the brothers there, brother by the name of Jazid Arif, he had read, because I had been to Sri Lanka before and given lectures there, and he had read a book which I had written called The Fundamentals of Tawheed. And in it, I explained about this phenomena, the phenomena of what appeared to be reincarnation, right? Because this boy, he was claiming that he was someone else. He gave a name, he gave a place where he died. When they went there, they found that yes, there was a boy by this name who had been killed in an accident, and he was a Hindu boy. And here he was now claiming that this was himself, and that his parents were so and so and so on. These were the names of the parents, etc. So it appeared to be a case of reincarnation. This is a belief shared by both the Hindus and the Buddhists. And then this case became so popular in Sri Lanka that even the president, Premadasa, had made statements about it, about this is showing that we're all from the same origin, whether you're Muslim or whether you're Hindu or you're Buddhist, we're all reincarnated. We could have been Hindus in our previous lives or whatever, So it was, for him, he used it as a means of what he felt to be uniting the people. And he even placed guards around the home of this family, to make sure nobody disturbed this process. In any case, as I mentioned, Jazid Arif had read my book, The Fundamentals of Tawheed, in which I described this case happening in India before, cases of reincarnation, and explained how it was possible for the jinn to implant ideas in the minds of children. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said dreams are of 3 types. There are dreams which are from Allah, good dreams, true dreams. Dreams which are from the ramblings of ourselves. We read something, we see something, and all of a sudden we see it back in our dreams. And then dreams which are from shaitan. Shaitan may come and put ideas in people's minds. You know, sometimes you wonder, a thought comes to your head and you wonder, where did that come from? You know, I wasn't thinking that kind of thought, and then here you are thinking it. You know, and this is why Prophet ﷺ told us that we're not held to account for our thoughts, because evil thoughts may come into our heads, you know, without our intention. And if we were to be held to account for every thought that came in our mind, we would be in very serious trouble. So Allah, being most merciful, does not hold us to account for the thoughts that we have. And what happens instead is that we are only held to account when we speak on the thoughts and we act on it. So what happens then is that a jinn may put, like the same qareen, may put the thoughts of that in the mind of that child, images, visions, or concepts where the child expresses these things thinking it is his or her own, not aware that it came from another source. In any case, Jazid Arif, when he read this in my book, he took a local Maulana there who had the title, they call him the Jinn Maulawi, you know, meaning that he was a person who was dealing with a lot of people who had possession, etc. He took him to visit this child and the family, and when he had a bit of difficulty getting there, but eventually he was able to get in to see the child. And the initial reaction of the child when he saw the scholar was to run, to scream. Eventually they were able to get the child, hold the child down. He recited Quran over the child, and the child stopped, changed, stopped speaking Tamil, reverted back to himself, and the whole state that he was in left him. Allahu Akbar. So the issues of possession, whether partial or complete, these are realities which we experience in our world today. Much of it serves to reinforce shirk, which is in common practice in various parts of the Muslim world as well as in the non-Muslim world. Mostly in the non-Muslim world, but unfortunately today amongst Muslims we find practices of shirk all over, and as such you will find that objects, places, things become possessed, visions appearing before people, so that the various shrines, like places like Ajmer, where people are making pilgrimage in the thousands, you know, to a grave, a mausoleum, and performing all kinds of acts of worship at places like this, you know, which is in fact out and out shirk. They will go there and have all kinds of experiences. You know, people will go there with illnesses, etc., and they find themselves coming back feeling better, and, you know, miraculous cures, etc. Now, we also find, as an aspect of possession and interference of the jinn, magic. Even magic itself, you know, is a result of the agency of the jinn. People who are involved in magic are mostly involved in some acts of sacrilege, but the way in which magic actually affects individuals is through the intervention of the jinn. Scholars of the past, you know, have identified this. Similarly, the evil eye, which is real. I know many times people, you know, who have come from Western backgrounds, been exposed to scientific teachings, etc. The idea of the eye, the evil eye, you know, this is something that people tend to want to deny. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, Al-Ainu Haqq. Al-Ainu Haqq. That the evil eye is a reality. And he gave us ways of treating it. But this issue of the eye, you know, as Ibn al-Qayyim had said, every possessor of the evil eye is jealous. There's jealousy which is involved in it, but not every jealous person possesses the evil eye. It doesn't mean just because a person is jealous automatically the evil eye is in effect and people are being affected, but it is in specific cases, and these specific cases are a result of intervention by the jinn. Now, in terms of exorcism, how do we treat those who are possessed? First and foremost, let me say that from an Islamic perspective, there is no such thing as an exorcist. No such thing as a profession where a person becomes a professional exorcist. We have this in the Christian tradition. They have a position in the church known as the exorcist. A person gets special training for it, and that's his job. In the case of Islamic tradition, people were not taking on this as specific roles, as I am an exorcist, that's my job, people, that's my 9 to 5, I'm an exorcist. No, what would happen is that people would get ill, through effects of the jinn, etc., and they would go to a local scholar, or they would go to, their friends or whatever, and whoever, felt a desire to try to help, they would seek to help them by recitations, Quranic recitations, etc., and in this way they were treated. How was that time? The one point I'd like to mention here is that there's a book called Medicine of the Prophet, in which it is described that the Prophet ﷺ prescribed amulets. Actually, the term used is ruqya or ruqa. And the translator of this book, Khuli, I think his name is, he translates this as amulets. So it appears that the Prophet ﷺ is prescribing amulets for people, but this is a mistranslation. The ruqa or ruqya are incantations, recitations, things which are said over a person who may be possessed. From an Islamic perspective, these recitations should be using Quranic verses, or it should be in statements which are intelligible. You have people who make amulets, which are commonly known in the Indo-Pakistani part of the world as ta'weez, where people will make these little writings and things, and they wrap it up and put it in a little case, and you wear it around your neck or on your arm, etc., etc. When you take these things apart and you look and see what is written on them, you will find it has a bunch of lines and letters and numbers and these kind of things, and this is all considered in the category of shirk. This is not acceptable. These numbers which people have assigned to Quranic verses, saying Bismillah is 786, this is a common number which people use, they will write it, 786, etc. And they believe this means Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Please know that it does not mean Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. 786 does not mean that at all. What they have done is they've given values to Arabic letters. And adding up these letters, they're getting 786. However, this same 786 could be used to create a sentence in which you're saying there is no God and Muhammad was a magician. You could write that out in Arabic and have it add up to 786 also. So please note that 786 has no special value. It does not mean Bismillah, and this use of numbers and letters to signify Quranic verses is nonsense. It has no basis in Islamic teachings at all. In terms of the treatment, and my time is running out, and actually there's a lot of material here, but anyway, I'll just try to shorten it down. In terms of methodology, what was the prophetic methodology? The prophetic methodology began with undoing charms. For example, in the case when a magic spell was cast on him, he was informed by angels that the person who did the charm was a particular individual, and he had made the charm and put it in the bottom of a particular well. So he sent Ali ibn Abi Talib to go and get this charm and take it apart, and whilst he was taking it apart, he recited the quls over it. So a part of the prophetic methodology is, if one finds a charm in one's home, and there are people unfortunately in the Muslim world who are very much involved in magic, people either because they want to get married, and there's a book on the market printed in Pakistan and India. It is also called Prophetic Medicine, and it has all kinds of things that you can write down if you want somebody to fall in love with you, if you want to have children, if you want this to happen or that to happen, you do this thing, you put it in water, you drink it, or you tie it on the person's door, or all kinds of foolishness, burn it, and all kinds of advices what to do to try to, creating these charms, putting it in people's homes and this type of thing, right? So if you find yourself in some state of illness or whatever, you find yourself uneasy and you find in your home some charm, what do? You take apart this charm, destroy it, while reciting the quls. The second method which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used was that of addressing the spirit which possessed the person. As I quoted before, he would call out to the spirit, saying, I am a slave of Allah, get out, O enemy of Allah. So the issue of addressing that spirit, instructing it to leave, is a part of the methodology of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ also invoked curses on the possessing jinn or interfering jinn. He would hear, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would say, A'udhu billahi mink, or Al-anak bila'anatillah. He would use these phrases, which is, may Allah curse you, I seek refuge in Allah from you, may Allah curse you. So this as part of the methodology for trying to expel the possessing spirit, one may call on Allah's curse on that possessing spirit. The third step is that of recitations. Recitations of Surah Al-Fatiha. This was done by the Sahaba. For example, Kharija ibn as-Salt had mentioned that on his return on a journey, he came across a man who was possessed and had been tied up in iron chains, and the family of the man had come to him and asked him if he had anything from Muhammad ﷺ to help treat such illnesses. So that companion recited Surah Al-Fatiha over him every morning and every evening for 3 days. And whenever he would finish the recitation, he would gather his saliva and spit off to the side, and the man eventually got well. So this, when he came back and informed Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ confirmed his use of Fatiha in this way. Now, this is a legitimate use of Fatiha outside of our prayer. There is another way what people tend to do. If we're going to have a gathering, before we start the gathering or at the end of each gathering, people will say Fatiha, and they go and they recite Fatiha. Actually, this is not from the Sunnah. We don't go and take Surah Al-Fatiha and start to use it for anything we want to use it for. We have it in the Quran, we read it when we read the Quran, we read it in our Salah. That's it. To use it for anything else, we must have authority from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see, this issue of utilizing the deen, it has to be, even for cases where people are possessed, etc., it has to be with confirmation from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. This whole issue of possession is not like an issue of physical illnesses, where when you're sick, you come to a doctor and the doctor will experiment on you. He thinks he has an idea of what your illness is, so he prescribes a medicine. If this medicine doesn't work, or the dosage is not high enough, he'll increase the dosage, or he'll prescribe another medicine. And he keeps prescribing until one finally works, right? Once that one works, then he will, make a note of it, and this becomes a part of medical tradition, that whenever a person comes with this particular illness, you use that medicine for that illness. Now, treating those who are possessed is not in the same way. We cannot go there and start experimenting and doing whatever works. So you find when you go into different parts of the Muslim world, people in dealing with possessed people, you'll find them doing all kinds of things. They're tying strings around people's fingers and around their toes. They will tie, knots in their hair. They will do all kinds of things. They tell you, okay, we're going to chase the jinn up your body, from your foot all the way up to your hair, and then it gets into your hair. We cut off the hair, we put it in a bottle, we set it on fire, we burn the jinn. I mean, these kinds of stories, these kinds of fables, people seem to get up and they feel they're well. I'm okay now. This thing worked, really. But what is happening here is that, in medicine, whenever they're giving a drug trial, a new trial for a drug, they always do it with a control group. They take 10 people and they will give them this medicine. Then there will be 10 people who they will tell they're giving this medicine, but they're giving them sugar pills, right? They call it placebo, right? Why? Because what they're going to find is that of those 10 people who were given this medicine, which was in fact sugar pills, maybe 30% of them will get well. They will get well. So if the actual medicine is only getting 40% well, and sugar pills are getting 30%, well, they say this medicine is no good, you know. If the medicine is working like 90% and then you have a 30% for the placebo, you say, okay, you've got a good medicine here. What this is telling you is that if a person has confidence in their doctor, that confidence, that trust can help to cure that person. Similarly, when this exorcist, he tells you, okay, the jinn, we've chased it up to your hair and we've taken it out, we got your hair, we're going to burn him. You know, the person is actually believing this thing, and in that case, where they're not actually possessed, you know, where what they had was a psychological problem, you know, or it may have been partially biological, then they cure themselves. So what we're dealing with here when we deal with the whole issue of exorcism is that we have a methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. This is deen here. The deen is not subject to experimentation. So we cannot experiment around and say whatever works now becomes, you know, this is valid, I can use this. We have among the prescribed things Ayatul Kursi. The scholars of the past used it and found that it was very effective, you know, based on the teachings of Prophet ﷺ in breaking spells which are on people. Among them the Basmala, Bismillah, using Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You know, Prophet ﷺ had said that you should place your hand wherever you feel pain in your body. If you're feeling pain in your body, it may not be a biological thing, because a jinn that has partially possessed a person may cause pain, or they may feel something in their body. So when a person has this, they place their hand on their body, they say Bismillah 3 times, and they say A'udhu billahi wa qudratihi min sharri ma ajidhu wa uhadiru. And this means I seek refuge in Allah and His power from the evil that I find and the evil that I fear. It is, you say Bismillah 3 times, I mean actually there's a whole bunch of them I'm going to be saying now. And then you say A'udhu billahi wa qudratihi min sharri ma ajidu wa uhadiru. We also have the ta'awudh, which is just in general seeking refuge in Allah. You know, as Allah tells us in the Quran, وَإِمَّا يَنزِغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. And if Satan touches you, seek refuge in Allah, for verily He is the hearer and knower. So we have Aisha radiallahu anha saying that Prophet ﷺ, whenever any member of his household fell ill, they had pains, etc., Prophet ﷺ used to blow over them and recite the mu'awwadhatan. We also have the adhan, reciting the adhan. The companions at the time, because Prophet ﷺ had said that whenever the adhan is recited, the evil jinn will flee, and when it's finished they will come back and interfere with an individual in his prayer. We also have a variety of prophetic prayers, but you know, unfortunately time is running out further and further. I can just say that we can find in the bookstore, the book which I wrote called The Exorcist Tradition in Islam, all of the prayers are listed there. Besides that, we also have medicines which Prophet ﷺ prescribed. He prescribed the ajwa dates, saying that the person who takes these dates in the morning, neither magic nor poison will hurt them. And also he prescribed what are known as truffles in English, and it's called al-kam'a in Arabic, that its water, use of the water, is a cure from the ayn, the evil eye. He also prescribed that if a person had, you know, caused an evil eye hurt to another person, he instructed the person who had caused it to take a bath, and they would take the water from that bath, to perform ablution, and he would take the water from the ablution, the water left over from the ablution, and the person who was affected by the evil eye would bathe with it. There's also the step, which is a very dangerous step, and which you have to be very careful of, that the person who may be possessed may also be hit. But the hitting, you know, has to be in a very controlled fashion. You know, it cannot reach the kind of extremes as took place, for example, in England, you know, about 4 years ago, where 2 peers in Manchester beat a young girl, 17-year-old girl, to death, you know, and they're in jail currently now for killing her in the course of exorcism. You know, when Prophet ﷺ hit somebody, as he may have hit a child or hit a young person who came to them with this, you know, he would hit them on their back, more like a pat on the back. If you got something stuck in your throat, you get a pat on the back, you know, not the practice, you know, of taking sticks and clubs and, you know, beating that person into a state of death or near death. In closing, I'd just like to say that we do have an issue that we have to address. The issue that Christians and Buddhists also exorcise. People come to them possessed, they're exorcised and they go away well. How do we explain this? If they're involved in shirk, etc., how can we explain this process? Well, the reality is that when a Christian or a Buddhist calls on Jesus or on Buddha, or, you know, makes statements of shirk, the person who is possessed, the jinn in that person will leave, not because it is forced out, but it will leave in confirmation of shirk to the followers. Because they see this person being cured, it appeared that they're cured by calling on Jesus or the scriptures of the Buddhists. But the fact of the matter is that the jinn is leaving, just confirming shirk in the minds of the people who are observing. Whereas in the case of a Muslim reciting Quran, the prophetic du'as over the person, the jinn is leaving because it is driven out. You will also find Muslims who may call on Muhammad ﷺ or call on some saints, and the person appears to be cured. Again, that curing is like that of the Christians and the Buddhists, etc. It is not a true curing. So, in closing, I would just now say that for Muslims, we have a variety of du'as, Quranic verses, etc., and practices which Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has given us in order to protect ourselves. Whether there are du'as to be said in the morning and the evening, du'as to be said before we go to bed, du'as we say before going to the bathroom. There is a variety of different du'as that are available in books like the Hisn al-Hasin, I think, or Hisn al-Muslim, Hisn al-Muslim, which is the fortification of the Muslim. This is a nice collection of authentic du'as, and it mentions in there most of the du'as which may be said, you know, to protect one from the effects of the jinn throughout one's day. I mean, even to the point where Prophet ﷺ gave us du'as before husbands and wives come together. There's a particular du'a we say to keep shaitan, the evil jinn, away from the offspring. So it is for us to learn these prophetic prescriptions. There is so much in the prophetic prescriptions that if we spent our time learning it, we wouldn't have time to get involved in the amulets and the other practices of shirk, etc., which are being offered in many parts of the Muslim world today as a means of dealing with exorcism. We should not go to those who are involved in magic to deal with magic. Those who are involved in magic are involved in sin, are involved in kufr. Because Prophet ﷺ said that whoever enters into magic has entered into kufr. So the only way is to use the method which Prophet ﷺ gave us, and we also protect ourselves by utilizing the various formula which he gave us. And at the same time, when we recite these formulas, we don't recite them in a ritualistic way, but reflecting on the meanings. And when we look into the meanings, we'll see that the meanings all involve putting our trust in Allah, because ultimately Allah is the one who cures, and we have to put our trust in Allah. It is not the person who recites over us or recited. Ultimately it is trust in Allah and the help of Allah. So even a person who may do all their du'as, recite all the things they should recite, do everything that they should do in a day, it doesn't mean that they can never be affected. They can still be affected, because Prophet Muhammad, who was the best of us, was affected by magic. So it can happen, but the point is, what do we do? Do we fall apart? Do we then turn to sources of shirk, etc., to cure ourselves? No. This is just a trial and test in our lives. We have to put our trust in Allah, and He is the best to protect, best to heal. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.